Wonderful to be here, everyone. Actually, like, what's that? Nice. All right. Very excited to present you today. Cyberdelics, context engineering, psychedelics for altered traits.
Okay, I'm Hayden Smith. So I run the Cyberdelics Society with Jose. I run the London Psychedelics Club. Both of those are looking at how do we achieve altered states without any substances. I've also founded the Museum of Consciousness, which is very much looking at sound and altered states. The challenge to the artist being, can you reliably create an altered state just with sound? And that should be measurable across cultures, across genders, across age groups. So we've got people like Aphex Twin and John Hopkins and Max Cooper, who are trying to submit something to the Museum of Consciousness. So I also, use Cyberdelics to help people prepare for entheogenic clinical trials at places like Imperial. So how can we prepare you for letting go is one of the big questions. And over to you.
Hi, everyone. So my first love was playing video games. as a child, they really taught me so much about the world, myself. I could type my name to a computer before I could write it. And it showed me that I could experiment with ways of being whilst also learning. And in my career, I've actually found myself as a neuroscientist. I'm secretary of Psychedelic Research in Science and Medicine, a not-for-profit based in Australia that are pioneering psychedelic research trials in Australia, focusing on things like end-of-life anxiety. We're exploring compounds like 5-MeO-DMT, psilocybin, MDMA for trauma. And personally, having experienced trauma, I've found that psychedelics and tools like meditation and mindfulness are really key in me being able to return to and re-engage with life. So I feel that Cyberdelics virtual reality can create and support these transformations.
Okay, so work with Maria on this concept of transcendent design. Actually, at NGX, we had a big show which Maria and Flux curated. But it's this question of how do we design our experiences, or how we risk them being designed for us. So design or be designed is the general idea. Transcendent design, and can we design transcendence? Because it's kind of like sometimes it happens when you least expect it, and therefore design that. Cyberdelic, from cyber to navigate and psychedelic to manifest. So Cyberdelic experiences create immersive digital spaces. So the focus is with Cyberdelics on digital technology. It's not really a Cyberdelic if it's not involving digital technology. So these spaces are where the user can contemplate perception, cognition, reality, and illusion. So Melissa and myself have this ongoing debate about whether Cyberdelics involve psychedelics. We did a big show actually in Melbourne, Psychedelic Society. And a lot of people, and The Guardian covered it, and there was an incredible amount of comments going, oh, this is nothing like a psychedelic. And we were like, well, it's not meant to be. It's another set of tools in the toolbox. It's not meant to be replicating the psychedelic experience. But as we've already mentioned, psychedelics can be used to prepare you for a psychedelic experience. So they're part of the contextual design, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, it's about precision designing and training for its opening the channels, basically.
So what is a psychedelic experience? What are we seeking to support and to help individuals embody? So under the right set and setting and the right context, psychedelics can facilitate transformative experiences. Abraham Maslow described these experiences as rare, exciting, oceanic, deeply moving, exhilarating, elevating experiences that generate an advanced form of perceiving reality. But not every psychedelic experience is transformative. What are the key aspects that allow altered states to be embodied into altered traits? Some of the altered states that we do see under psychedelics and in psychedelic therapy models are increased connectedness to nature, to self, to others, increased empathy, pro-social behaviors, increased creativity, increased divergent thinking, increased mindfulness and presence. So how can we support and facilitate transformation? This experience changes you, and psychedelics are by their nature experiential medicines. And transformation is mediated through the combination of pharmacology, phenomenology, and the set and setting, and the skills of both the therapist and the individual undergoing the journey. And there's two key components of transformation. There's the transformative experience itself. There's moments of insight, of bliss, of wonder, of beauty, of connectedness. But there's also the stabilization of change. There's a coming home and remembering that those experiences of interconnection show up in how you treat your partner, in how you speak to your mother when she calls you, these kinds of things. How do we embody and stabilize these experiences? How do we allow altered states to become altered traits?
Okay, so I've been talking about context engineering for some time. Another term for context engineering is ontological design. So this comes back to this idea of, you need to design your reality or have it be designed for you. Think about the metaverse. These are structures that are very much designed for us. So we need to be mindful of their framing and what they do to our experience. But context engineering is this idea that we are moving very quickly into a new economy, a new immersive economy where we all want to be in the film and not just watch it passively. We always, we want to be part of the immersion, much more than we currently are. So context engineering includes all sorts of tools that enable you to change your perception at the fundamental level. So whether it's changing the way you see, changing the way you hear. For instance, I bought a 360 helmet that's given me 360 vision for a week, or for a whole week. And it made me realize what happens to fashion if you can see in 360. What happens to sport? So everything changes once the context engineering occurs. But yeah, it's this general gist that we can use context engineering to enable those altered traits to be stabilized. So this design of a pre-context and a post-context is really important. But as Melissa says, there's a lot more to it in terms of the parameters for reaching the transcendent design, because you need to think about your body set, not just your mindset, how psychologically stable you are, but also how fit are you, how much sleep have you had. Body set. Marlin over in Maastricht is doing a lot of work on that. And I think that's, it's also, if you're in therapy, then the skills of the therapist and psychedelic training is super important as well. So other aspects of what we're talking about, a lot of my work is involving mixed reality, extended reality. So building technologies that help us learn, primarily cognitive science. Most of the time, technologies, as we know, don't help us learn, they make us more stupid. So how do we really engage with these technologies and understand their effects? And the kinds of things that we can do in the context that we're talking about today is VR therapy, so exposure therapy, all sorts of therapies for PTSD. If you've got social anxiety, then be in a virtual world with other people and spend time with them. If you're scared of spiders, be with spiders. All of that kind of stuff.
So we know from research that psychedelics create what we call a pivotal mental state. They hypermobilize the faculties of neuroplasticity and potential change. And the idea of incentivizing behavior through gamification, it can be really key in allowing an individual to experience a sense of self-agency, experience a sense of that they are a player in this game of life versus someone who is controlled by the whim of preconditioned behaviors and experiences. So gamification may incentivize learning by creating autotelic experiences that by their nature are rewarding and pleasurable, and thus memorable. There are some key synergies between psychedelics and cyberdelics. Psychedelics sensitize an individual to their environment, the therapeutic environment, which is a key component of how they facilitate change. They increase presence, mindfulness, non-judgment, openness, and also an appreciation of the natural and visual world. And one of the limitations of psychedelics in terms of outcomes, remission in terms of therapy, so the limitations being anxiety and resistance to the experience. Whereas cyberdelics are context-engineered immersive environments. And through the use of technology, we can track through feedback, things like heart rate, breath rate, be able to sense when someone is becoming anxious or stimulated, and potentially modulate and change the game world to help sensitize them and allow them to open up and re-immerse in their experience. So these visuals can be tailored to the individual and can be modifiable through biofeedback. So where do psychedelics and psychedelics fit? How do we place this field? As extended reality, virtual reality experiences, VR therapy. There's a traditional psychedelic-assisted therapy, the process of preparation, acute experience integration, immersive art, and also the idea of psychoeducation and mindfulness training. And psychedelics really fit in between these fields. It can facilitate and help people understand the nature of their mind, the nature of experience, and train different aspects of meditation and mindful traits. Some key design targets that we're seeking to activate and enhance through psychedelic experiences are awe. Awe is a key component of psychedelic experience, a sense of the small self in place of a much vaster experience, the observer effect, the view of seeing the earth from space. These experiences expand one's frame of reference and can induce feelings of gratitude, humility, and connection. Also, flow states. Flow is that state poised between anxiety, being overwhelmed, not having enough skills to meet the demands of the situation, and boredom or being distracted or relaxed. And flow is poised in between there and can enhance, accelerate learning, skill development. It is associated with a removal of self-focus and immersion with being and experience. Whereas play is being studied as a key predictor of how satisfied we are with our lives. And it's key in the way that the brain explores through flexibility and renews neural connections.
Okay, so you've heard about what we're trying to achieve with these game mechanics, and I think this is where this is the sort of the essence of our contribution to knowledge here, which is these should be replicable. These game mechanics should work for others in their constructions, in their games, and their immersive designs. So just for awe, one of the things that we're trying to achieve is, gratitude, appreciation, gratitude for nature, having a reset, if you like, coming back to reality afresh and seeing it anew, I think is an amazing game mechanic if you can achieve it. And also tolerance for ambiguity. There's something called complexity management, having an ability to cope with stress, to cope with complexity, I think is a really important game mechanic. And running out of time, so moving on quickly, this idea of presence in different senses. Talk about a few different psychedelics later on. It's really interesting when you become like a corpse, for instance, and what's the presence of death? What's death literacy all about? Estrus describes beneficial stress. Sometimes we learn from the uncomfortable states. Much more the bad trips are actually the things that we learn from the most, even though they're quite difficult to manage. How do we cope with that?
So metacognition is thinking about thinking. It's also really key for how we learn from our mistakes, from our experiences, and how we integrate our sense of self moving forwards. Well, it's a bit word, but it's okay. It looks really good here. So hopefully people on Zoom see that. So metacognition is thinking about thinking. It's being able to hold one's own mind state in mind and also the other's mind state in mind. So key aspects of metacognition include attention, the ability to attune and regulate our attention, to be able to be present with the breath, to be present with bodily sensations, our understanding of our own interoception, developing an awareness of bodily states. And
Come back later.
but not actually moving. And mindset. So mindset is really key in how we approach experiences. Plays a pivotal role in how we meet opportunities and move through challenge. So through VR experiences, through virtual experiences, we can help an individual prepare and explore different aspects of mindset. For example, an approach mindset, willingness, creativity, openness, discernment, courage, and play. So the idea of, how do we make work, how do we make life play? Potentiality is this idea of a space between fantasy and reality that is inhabited by play, imagination, symbolism, and creativity, and the space between which an individual can move between their past self, their current self, and their future self. Where self-agency is a key part of self-determination, also self-efficacy. The idea that we understand ourselves and can meet situational demands and be able to embody a sense of self-determination, moving through one's own knowledge, perspective, and capacities.
Okay, so swiftly moving on to some psychedelic experiences. One of the most powerful comes out of Bristol initially, David Glowacki's Isness experience, which actually has just been featured in Nature. Isness is an incredible physics engine that powers this virtual experience. And what you see inside the game is just a point of light. So you connect your mudra with these special gloves, which is cosmic consciousness and individual consciousness. When it connects, you actually see a point of light and nothing else, just this point of light. You do the second one, and then suddenly you see other people. So there's 3 other people all connecting to become light, really. So removal of Maya, removal of the physical world, and you see yourself as light. And then there's a physics engine that connects you all together, and there's a whole series of immersive experiences around that. Virtual Awakening from Jose, who's my co-partner on the Cyberdelics Society. So Virtual Awakening about death literacy. How do we come to grips with this existential crisis? Extremely powerful. A lot of shamans have actually come out of that experience crying. So it's equally as powerful as a psychedelic experience. Eternal Return is something that was at the BFI just recently, absolutely mind-blowing experience, which is a combination of Scan Labs and a couple of artists. So this one again is around, it's a composite work, as in that when you're in the virtual space, you're also touching the physical reality. And it's like, exploring realities of speculative fiction is the sort of the subtitle. But just want to talk about some of the game mechanics in there. You're sort of interacting with point clouds, which is something I've not actually done much of. You can see point clouds around, but this is that you can transform the point clouds through this experience. At one point, a piano workshop comes out of a teacup. And it's just mind-blowing designs. There's a double consciousness going on in there as well, because, like I say, the virtual world is mixed with the real. So when you touch something in the virtual, you're actually touching these sort of bespoke archaeological objects. And there's also a resonance between the performer and the participant. So there's an element of trust in there, which is a very interesting game mechanic. And then there's amazing non-dual experiences where you move through these point clouds, and then the point clouds, like there's a wall, and then suddenly there's no wall. So you go through these sorts of ghosts. Suddenly you become a ghost, being able to move through walls. And then the death literacy aspect is amazing, because ScanLab had actually forensically scanned corpses and turned them into point clouds. And then in the game, you crawl inside one of these corpses, and you see all of these maggots sort of eating away at you, and then you drop into the floor. And I was like, wow, that's the perfect game mechanic for like entering the mystery school of, what we're doing is obviously on the weekend. And finally, the Tree Hugger experience is one of my first experiences from Marshmallow Laser Feast. Amazing experience, because they've actually LiDAR scanned, so created a digital twin of a sequoia tree in California. And so you're not interacting with CGI, you're interacting with nature, with a real copy, a digital twin of a real tree. But the advantage is that you can see you can become the tree through the interaction with water. So you're seeing the tree from the water going through the tree, and yeah, out of body experiences galore. Very worth checking out. Over to you.
That's finishing off. We were discussing earlier today the idea of the metaverse and this awareness of technology designs and how that can is impacting human design. So how do we avoid the television dictatorships of the future? How do we democratize the cyberscreen politics of the future? Thinking of psychedelic research, psychedelic science, and the initial discovery of psychedelics in the 60s, and Timothy Leary's phrase, turn on, tune in, drop out. There was a lot of consequence to that kind of mentality in the 60s of creating this polarization between this new form of experiencing this pivotal, hypermobilizing mind state, and the frustration, the very natural frustration of being confronted with the culture that we find ourselves in, the limitations we find ourselves in. I think what is really key about this new way of psychedelic research is that there's a shift from turn on, you drop out, to what Timothy Leary actually corrected himself over time to say turn on, tune in, boot up. Step in, engage, change from within ourselves, change from within the culture, working with the narrative tools that already exist through VR, through technology, through science, to move towards transcendent design and to define our own futures.
Thank you.